Did you guys hear the one about the bishop of the Cathedral of Notre Dame who sends word that a new bell ringer is needed? And the bishop decides that he'll conduct the interviews personally, and he goes up into the belfry to start the screening process. And after several applicants demonstrate their skills, he decides to call it a day. And then this lone, armless man comes up to him and says that he's there to apply for the bell ringer's job. And the bishop says, "But you have no arms." And the man says, "No matter, observe." And then he starts striking the bells with his face. And he makes a beautiful melody. The bishop listens in astonishment, convinced that he's found a replacement for Quasimodo. Suddenly, rushing forward to strike one of the bells, the armless guy trips and he plunges out of the belfry window to his death in the street below. The bishop rushes down the stairs. When he gets to the street, a crowd is gathered around the armless guy, and they're drawn by the beautiful music that they'd heard from the bells. And as they let the bishop through, one of them asks, "Bishop, who was this man?" And the bishop says, "I don't know his name, but his face rings a bell." Joe Bob Briggs reminding you that the drive-in will never die. Did you think that joke was over? That joke is not over. This is a rare two-part joke. The next day, the bishop continues his interviews for the bell ringer of Notre Dame. Well, the first man to apply to the bishop says, Your Excellency, I am the brother of the poor armless wretch that fell to his death from this very belfry yesterday. I pray that you honor his life by allowing me to replace him in this duty. The bishop agrees to give the man an audition, and as the guy stoops to pick up a mallet to strike the first bell, he groans, clutches his chest, and dies on the spot. Two monks hear the bishop's cries of grief at this second tragedy, and they rush up the stairs to his side, and the monks say, "What happened? Who is this man?" And the bishop says, "I don't know his name, but he's a dead ringer for his brother."
This is the emergency podcast system. This is not a test. Movies are bombing all over the country. They are posing as movies you already know. They may already be in your theaters, your neighbor's home, or even your own. Do not panic. Specialists have been dispatched. They will help you identify these pretenders and defend you against this invasion of the remake. Please stand by for further instructions.
Welcome to the Invasion of the Remake podcast. I am your host, Jason Bishop, and this is the last solo outing for me. This is the last of our Horror Con specials. We've got an interesting lineup for you today. We hit the floor of Horror Con finally, get a few interviews along the way. We catch up with author Kon Lavery on his latest novel, and we talk a little bit about his artwork as well. I dropped by the Prankzter booth where I bought this kick-ass Jason mask. It looks like it's kind of like carved out of bark of a tree. It's really cool. When I saw it, I had this whole story in my head of how Jason became, his spirit inhabited the forest of Crystal Lake, and he's literally the embodiment of Crystal Lake now. That's what the mask said to me when I saw it. So it was really cool. Hanging up on my wall. Actually, it's in a box now that I'm packing, but it'll be back up at the new place. And then we get some more Joe Bob Briggs when he did this Q&A after a presentation from CUF, the Calgary Underground Film Festival. And he did a presentation after Killbots, aka Chopping Mall, and it was a lot of fun watching the movie with him doing an intro. I didn't record the intro because it was very specific to setting up Killbots and Chopping Mall. We've got our own episode about Killbots / Chopping Mall, and a lot of the things that Joe Bob mentioned, we mentioned in our episode as well. But the Q&A is a whole different animal, and I think you'll enjoy it. So we'll run that as well. And then finally, we return back to the floor, and Trish gets a tarot reading from Michael McAdam. You'll hear from him earlier in the podcast and a little bit later when he does the tarot reading for Trish, which is a lot of fun. And if we know Trish, she'll question all the good things that come out of the tarot reading. And that'll end the podcast for this week. We had a lot of fun at Horror Con. Thanks to Dan and everybody who was at Horror Con. Thank you for having us and allowing us to present these recordings to the world. And thank you for being patient, our listeners, while I am taking this hiatus to move. I'm moving into a new abode here in Calgary, and packing and stuff, it takes a lot of time. So I'm glad I had all this stuff recorded to give you guys something to listen to while I'm trying to relocate and pack up all my stuff. And there's a lot of it when you're sitting in your last house for the last 10 years. You accumulate a lot of stuff. Oh my God. So still packing. This will be the last HorrorCon episode. Then we'll probably take a couple weeks off where I'll be transitioning into the new place and finish packing and moving. And then we'll try to get out our regular episodes. Don't worry, the 31 Days of Horror episodes will be coming. But I had to postpone those because they are very long episodes to record, and they're even longer to edit. So I can't afford to lose an entire day, 2 days per episode on those right now until I've relocated. Once I've relocated, then, I can unpack it, take as long as I want. But I have an end date where I'm at, so I got to use those days wisely. So anybody who's moved knows what it's like. Thanks for understanding. We'll get those out to you as soon as we can. I don't know if we'll get them in before Christmas, but we'll try. If not, we'll bump them into January after we get Cult Movie Trailer a go-go. I'm not sure what the order of things are going to be, but we'll make it work. We'll figure it out. We always do. Without further ado, here we are back at HorrorCon. Down here with Michael McAdam here at HorrorCon, and we've talked to him a couple of times. It's been about 3 years since we last visited with you, and you've got some new stuff to get, and some new comics, and even a new novel. Why don't you tell us a little bit about them?
Sure thing. Well, as my father always said, never waste a good pandemic. So, of course, when you've got like 2 years off from conventions, you create. So I wrote a novel. It's called Special Proper Magic. It's a young adult novel about two cousins, one of whom can see ghosts, one of whom can move things with his mind. And they spend their summer locating a missing boy. So it's kind of a youth adventure with ghosts. And then I've got Twilight Detective Agency, Girls Out, numbers 1, 2, and 3. That's written by Mike Rieger and drawn and lettered by him too. And we've got 3 issues of that all just came boom, boom, boom in the last 2 years. And that is about 2 female gargoyles that are fleeing an oppressive gargoyle regime. And there's murder, mystery, and magic left in their wake. So they are agents of chaos. And the comic is very much about that. I have Spectrum number 2. That's brand new at the show here. And it's about LGBT teen superheroes and sort of there as they journey through life and figuring themselves out while dealing with superpowers on top of that. I've got Gloaming number 4, brand new at this show, which is a horror comic drawn by Kyle Burles, written by myself, and it's about a journalist that comes to a small town looking for a boy that never existed. Issue number 4 is the end of the first story arc, and after that, we are going to get really deep with some of the horror stories. If you liked The Witching Hour growing up, if you liked House of Mystery or all those anthology horror comics, Gloaming is the book for you.
Is there a trade paperback coming to that down the road?
Absolutely there is. The first 4 issues will be gathered into one graphic novel, and we will be having extras in the graphic novel because Kyle, who is a huge horror history fan, has seeded little in-jokes all throughout the book that if you don't know your horror history, you might find delightful to find explained in the book.
Awesome. Now, you had a tie-in comic book to your novel, Special Proper Magic, and that was The Magical Mr. Punch.
That's correct. Magical Mr. Punch number 1 is out now, and it's sort of a tie-in just in a tangent way because it is the same character. Mr. Punch is actually the young man in the novel, but of course in the comic he is grown up and he is narrating his own past as he catches you up with the present. So it's an origin story, but it's also joining in the middle of the action. And he is basically fighting a system of oppression as well that wants to stamp out magic.
That sounds awesome. And you've got all sorts of things as well here, buttons and pins and some witchcraft stuff.
Yes, indeed. I do have a little side witchy business there, and because it's HorrorCon, I'm just noticing that, there are a lot of witch-adjacent sort of things here. So I've got cauldron candles. They're beeswax candles in cast iron cauldrons. I've got spell bottles. I have spell candles, mojo bags, and cute little pins that say witch.
Burn them!
You burn!
Where can people find your comics, and if they're not local to Calgary, how can they get them?
Well, twogargs.com, that's TWOGARGS.com. You can order through there. You can find me on Drive-Thru Comics. And you can find me on Indie Planet as well. So you can get print or digital, but start with twogargs.com and we can go from there. Comics and novels all available through the website.
Any Kickstarters going on right now?
Not right now, but look for the Magical Mr. Punch coming up in July.
Sounds great. We look forward to do it. And of course, regular listeners know I run Words of Pictures, and you can get these comics there as well. Thanks for talking to us, Michael.
All right, thanks so much, Jay.
All right, we're back here at Horror Con with one of our favorites to talk to, novelist Kon Lavery. Kon Lavery. You think after so many years I'd know how to say it properly. And you've got a couple new books since the last time we saw you, because I guess with nobody having anything to do over the last 2-3 years, you got a few books made.
Yeah, I was busy. I was like, I have nothing but time, so I ended up writing a bit. I got 2 out, which was Rave. It's like a slasher horror novel, and Into the Macrocosm, which encompasses and umbrellas all my stories under one universe through short stories. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So like an anthology short story book. That's very cool.
Yeah.
And was this the one we talked earlier yesterday off air about the slasher book?
Yes. Yeah, that one's the latest and greatest. It kind of takes place in Prince George going to Hinton, so kind of local to Western Canada. It takes place in the 90s with a lot of the familiar tropes of like there's a killer in the woods and the angsty young adults that are all horny and into drugs and all that. But it's got this whodunit kind of Canadian aspect with a twist on environmentalism and stuff, so it refreshes the genre, but respecting the tropes.
Well, it's a killer in the woods in a lumber town.
Yes.
Of all places. So it's you have a killer in the woods, but we're running out of woods.
Yep. And he has an axe as a weapon, so
nice.
It fits.
Exactly. Well, I mean, you're kind of a youngster though, so like the 90s, how much research were we doing going back then?
I did do a little bit, because I was still very young, so I wasn't going to the raves, but all my friends are they were older than me, so by 8 to 10 years, and they went to those raves and told me like how it went, where you would get a guy's name who would tell you where to get the ticket the day of to get the location. You just wouldn't know this stuff because it was all underground, wasn't legal. There were no like sponsors like Monster or Red Bull. It was all like hush hush, and everyone was invited, very welcoming and opening, but it would be like an abandoned warehouse or something. So yeah, I interviewed friends who were into the rave culture of the time, and they told me how it worked. Fascinating thing was luck. It was a luck situation where I met a former RCMP officer at a book signing who worked in rural Alberta as an officer in the 90s. So I was like, okay, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. And, well, how would this happen in this scenario? He's like, well, we'd block off this and do this and X, Y, Z. So factually, it lines up too.
That's sweet, because I mean, the other thing too is I know as Canadians we have a lot of ideas about justice and how it works, but from a U.S. perspective, Canadian law and order is a completely different area.
It is, yeah, and it's quite a bit different, and that's how I originally wrote the first draft, and then I had to go back and change a lot of the stuff which affected how the characters maneuvered throughout the story to get to eventually the end climax, which I wanted to keep, so the meat had to change.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's excellent. So I guess I want to go over to Microcosm now as well.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of short stories, but is there a unifying element to them, you say?
Yes. Yeah. So it's been a dream since I was like a little kid to make a universe where everything falls together or comes together, and there's been Easter eggs throughout it all, but the Macrocosm one, even though they're short stories, there's an overarching story that connects them together, where the premise is like the nameless one, it's told through the second person, so you, the reader. You're trying to figure out what happened to your memories and how you died. And one of the characters who's in my fantasy series, he's kind of a Cheshire cat type character. He's like, all right, we're going to go live other lives through these other souls, which are the short stories, to figure out how you died and unravel the clues to figure out how the nameless one died. And that's, the whole book. So you go travel through time and live different experiences, being like horror, fantasy, sci-fi, and that builds up the short story collection.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you made the reader kind of like an actual character in the
book.
story. That's
Yeah.
fascinating. So like that must be. So if I read it, am I going to be going through time? I just want to know that.
Oh yeah, you'll be going all over. Yeah.
That's where you got your dream from, Jay.
They don't know about the dream, and I'm
They
not
don't.
telling them.
No.
Some dreams are meant for us.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Where can people find the book, and how can they order it if they're not at a horror convention like we are today?
Yeah, they can find them in ebook and print on Amazon, then Apple, Kobo, all the usual. If you want print, Amazon's the best. In paperback and hard copy. The sequel to it's coming out July 1st, which is a Choose Your Own Path short story collection. Yeah, so you, the reader, get to start controlling and dictating where the story goes. So yeah, Amazon, you'll find me, Kon Lavery, it'll show up.
Well, I'm going to switch gears here. I want to talk to Kon Lavery, the artist. Are you selling your art online as well?
It's never occurred to me, but it's because I'm a graphic designer by trade, so if people are ever interested in stuff, on my website, which is konlavery.com, or social media, people can reach out to me and we can discuss from there.
There you go. I had to ask because I'm a OG art collector,
Yeah.
so when I see something I like, I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
sell them that?
Well, this is it. We love Kon, but we're also extremely jealous of you and kind of hate your talent a bit. But we do love you as a person.
How dare you be so talented?
There's a little bit of rage. Because you're also lovely. Like, there's just like, where are the flaws? Can we find them?
I don't know. I'm a vegetarian.
That's not a flaw.
Okay. And I don't know.
And
You're bad at parallel parking. Something.
No, I'm not.
God damn it.
what about Kon Lavery, the musician?
Oh yeah, I'm not the best musician. It's definitely passion driven, but yeah, my books have scores with them, and like I'll collaborate with other musicians, and it's weird industrial down tempo, like ambient type stuff, and rave has a musical component to it as well, where I got some musicians in Calgary and Edmonton. They banded together and worked with me to create a score that is thematically matching the book.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So maybe can I give you an idea for your next thing? Remember those old Disney ones where you came with the record and you'd use your own adventure? Do one like that.
Oh yeah, that'd be fun.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like going, you've gotten to chapter 6, now go to track 5.
Yeah. Well, it works because, like, yes, when the songs line up with certain chapters too, so they just aren't labeled.
There we go.
Yeah. Okay. I'll make a note on that.
I want to do that.
Yeah. No, that'd
All
be
right.
fun.
Well, we've told you where to find it. Go get it. There's some great stuff here, and I am really stoked about a Canadian slasher book.
Yeah.
Looking forward to the low-budget 80s film version
Oh, yeah.
down the road.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll happen. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm out here at the booth of Prankzter Custom Art, and yesterday I bought this kick-butt Jason mask that you can check it out on Facebook and Twitter on our Invasion of the Remake page. This wood grained with a little bit of that wood burn Jason mask, and these are all custom made Jason masks that are very unique to Prankster Custom Art, and I'm here with the artists. And how long does it take you to make one of these masks?
Well, a lot of it is the drawing time. I can make 5-6 masks over a weekend. If I had a stopwatch and actually timed, it's probably maybe 2.25 hours each mask, but it's waiting in between each mask to let it dry properly and to not rush it, to let it just happen. Every time I rush, try and use a heat gun or something, speed it up. Sometimes I get happy accidents, but usually it's like, oh darn, I'll have to sand that section down again and fix it. But yeah, about 2.25 hours for most. I have a lot of stencils that I make by hand for some of the images, like the maple leaves, the hearts. It's placing those, getting those right, getting the colors right. But I've done probably about 150 masks since November 2020. So I've gotten better, gotten quicker, learned some tricks, some not what to do. Sometimes I forget. I miss a step and have to go back. But really, pretty much every mask, it has a life of its own and it works out.
Yeah, they all feel just slightly unique to each other. There's no one that looks identical to the other one. Even though if you do like a wood grain or something, they always seem to be unique to that mask.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like doing I don't want to do reproductions. I like just having fun and going with the flow. It's like, okay, I like the damage on this one I made last weekend. I want to incorporate that, but I want to use the St. Andrew's cross for a Scottish Jason or a Texas flag Jason, and I've learned so much making all these masks, and they just keep getting better and better. I do still make mistakes, but I'm at a good place with my work, and the response over the weekend here has been phenomenal. People are so excited.
Well, the fun thing about this, I can look at some of these and it feels like a story. Like the one I bought, I'm like, wow, what if the spirit of Jason infected the Crystal Lake forest? And now I'm looking at this toxic waste one, and that just tells you a story of what might have happened in a movie that never got made.
Yeah. I mean, the hockey mask image, it's iconic. It's so flexible. And I always think to Jason, but just the hockey mask image, and it can go in so many directions. And I've done some different crossovers. We're big kaiju fans, Godzilla fans, and I actually made a Hedorah Jason crossover.
Wow.
So what if Camp Crystal Lake got polluted and Hedorah he infected Jason, and it's a pretty cool mask. I'm actually going to enter that one at G-Fest in Chicago in a few weeks. So
awesome.
Yeah. And then I'm developing a Darth Voorhees mask. So I've done
cool
2 versions of that one, and I'm now printed a full helmet. I'm going to make a whole Darth Voorhees costume. And my plan is, instead of a lightsaber, Jason would carry a light machete. So I'm going to try and use some LEDs and have like a machete. Yeah.
Well, tell everybody where they can follow you on Instagram so they can see some of your artwork and maybe reach out and get a mask of their own.
Yeah, so on Instagram, I'm at Prankzter Art and Custom, and Prankzter is with a Z, and there's a story behind that I'll tell you another day, but it's Prankzter Art and Custom on Instagram.
We've got a Wendigo screaming in the background right now, destroying a young child. That's what happens when you're naughty at Christmas, kids.
So if you follow me on there, you can see examples of a lot of my work, and you can message me directly. Right now, I do post some masks on Etsy and on Kijiji locally, and fans have seen my masks, say, on Kijiji. They've reached out to me and asked for a custom that way. So there's some different ways to get a hold of me. I also have a Gmail, and it's prankstercustomart@gmail.com.
Great, and we'll try to get that posted in our liner notes of the show as well when this goes live. One last question. Are you going to start thinking about outside of Jason, like the Scream mask or Michael Myers?
Yeah, actually, I mean, I love the Jason mask because it's such a flexible image, and
Yes.
I'm getting more into thinking of the mask not as necessarily Jason mask or hockey mask. It's a canvas, and so I want to start doing maybe some creepy landscapes on the mask, like just treating it like a canvas. I follow some folks, some artists that customize Michael Myers masks, things like that. I wouldn't mind getting into that. But I don't know if my wife will let me take over another table in the house right now. And I do if you check my Instagram page, I do a lot of painting as well. We're developing photos, prints with the mask. So there's so much right now. But yeah, I'm always taking on new things.
I guess I was getting the daggers when I opened up that door.
I'm his daughter. I love
Okay.
I take photos.
Well, thanks very much for talking with us, and beautiful artwork. It's fantastic. Some of my favorite of the show.
Thank you. Yeah, the show's been great, and the fans coming out, and it's been great. Like, we went out last night and celebrated what a great day we had yesterday, and today's on course for the same thing. So I may not make it into work tomorrow.
These horror conventions are just so much fun. They're some of my favorites to ever go to because, I don't know, there's just something about horror fans that are always like-minded, love of the genre, but you think they're the scariest bunch, but they're also the sweetest bunch because they just love this.
They've been so kind and so appreciative, and just flexible and not critical at all. I have met some critical fans of my masks and other work over the last few years. Everyone that comes up to the table and we chat with has been nothing but positive. You know, they're not nitpicking. It's just been fun, and that's been great.
All right, well, the Wendigo wants us to stop, so thanks again.
Yeah, you're good. Let's come over in the light a bit more. Okay. So we're so happy to have you here. I do want to kick things off. What was the first time you got the movie bug? Remember what the first film or cinematic experience that you choosing for the movies?
When I was a kid in elementary school, we lived in Texarkana, the Twin Cities on the Arkansas-Texas line. And they had a theater downtown, and basically all the parents in Texarkana would just dump their kids on Saturday and leave them there all day long. And they would have, Three Stooges films and a magician and pony rides. I don't know what all. It's just like you just stayed at the theater all day long. So my earliest memories of movies are like running up and down like wild children, running all through this theater where the whole town just dumped the kids there. And but the first horror film I can remember is Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. And it was so scary to me as a kid that I couldn't stand Betty Davis the rest of my life. And she was just the scariest woman to me ever. And she had a great career in horror. The last 20 years of her career were in horror, and she was great at it.
Well, pretty much created the entire evil hag genre.
Exactly, psycho hag. Psycho hag subgenre. She was the queen of that. In fact, I think her last movie was a Larry Cohen movie. now I'm blanking on the name of it. Somebody here knows. What?
Wicked Stepmother.
Wicked Stepmother. In like 1988. And Larry Cohen was one of the few directors that she did not get fired.
So you talked about a bit about it at the panel today, so forgive me if we're repeating anything, I'll try not to. But you started out as a journalist for a newspaper, and you kind of got shoehorned or kind of positioned to review horror movies. What was the appetite for horror movies like at the time that you first started reviewing them?
Oh, it was disposable trash. No, they weren't reviewed. Nobody reviewed it. I mean, it's like, I can remember, in fact, the original newspaper column I did, Joe Bob Goes to the Drive-In, was in the Dallas Times-Herald, because I knew that it would probably be unpopular with my bosses, I conspired with the entertainment editor to bury it in this Friday entertainment section that was just used furniture ads, just like back on page 28. Because one thing, if there's any professional journalists here, there's one thing that you know, and that is that the editor and publisher of your paper never actually read the paper. They look at the front page, then they look at the front sports page, and then they ask if there was a fire that day, and then they go home. And so I knew that they wouldn't read it. They wouldn't see it for weeks, and so that's exactly what happened. It's like the readers discovered it, but the publisher and editor were just like unaware of it until it was too popular to kill. And so that's how I got it. That's how I continued to do it in the paper.
What were some of the earliest articles to kind of catch on to build this fan base? Do you remember?
It was just whatever was at the drive-in that week, It was, the very first film was known in the United States as The Grim Reaper, but the real title was Anthropophagus. And we recently showed it on the last drive-in, but I didn't realize, I thought it was kind of a mediocre movie, and then I discovered years later they'd taken out all the greatest gore scenes in a failed effort to get an R rating, so I didn't know until years later that it was a Joe D'Amato movie. Of course, I wouldn't know who Joe D'Amato was in 1982, but later I was like, oh, Joe D'Amato, the guy with 150 aliases. He's like a major name in Italy, and so I watched it again, and it was like, oh, now I get it. It has those. It has like what? I mean, if you made a list of the top 10 nastiest gore scenes ever, the one where he rips the fetus out of the it was like, yeah, you were trying to get your R rating. Yeah, fuck you.
Joe D'Amato goes hard. Emmanuel in America is the gnarliest movie I've ever seen. Joe Bob, I want to know the first time you ever heard the term aardvarking in terms of making.
No, that was just me inventing the term aardvarking. Because there are so many words you can't say in a newspaper. And so you can invent a nonsense word, and it actually will end up sounding nastier than the real word that you're replacing it with. The interesting thing is that when I was at the TNT network, they had a list of words that you can't say on the air, an official list. And so that didn't bother me, because I had a word for every word that they had. But they were made up words, they were not real words. My made-up words started appearing on the official list of the forbidden words, and I said, that's not fair. You can't put nonsense words on the official forbidden list of TNT Network. They were just, they wouldn't back off a bit from that,
What are some other ones?
Some other words? Well, I used to get somebody like really stupid, I used to call him a slopehead. And TNT said that's a Asian slur. And I said, no, you're thinking of slant eye, which would be an Asian slur. But this is slopehead. And that's not a slur on any nationality, unless you know of a nationality that has sloped heads. It would probably be a nationality from another planet. And so I don't think we would be in danger from, I actually had these conversations with the Standards and Practices Department. To no avail, you can never say slopehead again.
Okay, Standards and Practices. I want to hear about the set of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, if you could share a few tales. I know there's a scene that you were in that was cut from the film and that you were writing an article on Dennis Hopper at the time. But I love that film and it feels so of its time, new wave meets horror. I just want to hear about what the vibe of the set was.
Well, it's interesting that the film has such a great reputation because I don't even think Tobe Hooper wanted to make the film. He had a deal with Canon Films, and the deal was if they would finance Life Force and the remake of Invaders from Mars, then he would agree in return to make Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. He didn't want to make Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. And then by the time he was making it, Life Force and Invaders from Mars had failed at the box office. So he was triply depressed that now he has to make, Texas Chainsaw 2. And he hired a friend of his, Kit Carson, to write the screenplay.
Paris, Texas.
Carson had written Paris, Texas for Vim Vendors. What? Where did that come from? And I never understood why Kit Carson was the screenwriter on that. Anyway, so yeah, I'm down in Austin writing an article for Rolling Stone about Dennis Hopper, and Toby goes, "Hey, you that guy that writes about Texas Chainsaw Massacre all the time?" "Yeah." He goes, "Oh, go over there with Kit and write yourself a scene. Work with Kit, write a couple scenes for yourself." Okay. And so we wrote these scenes, and we shot the scenes, and it was a death scene, and about 2 weeks before the movie comes out, he calls me, Tobe Hooper calls me, and he says, "Canon Films is cutting the running time on the film, and I'm so sorry, but both of your scenes got left on the cutting room floor." I said, Toby, I'm so surprised. They were so organically connected. And so they were restored, I think. Not restored, but they were included as a DVD extra somewhere.
Oh yeah, they're still kicking around. Okay, so you've acted a few times, Hogzilla included. Can I get a chance? But, okay, you talked about this earlier, but it was so good. Can you talk about getting hired for Martin Scorsese's Casino, please?
I just told them.
I know, but these people weren't here. It was so good. No, please, we need to hear it again, Joe Bob.
Yeah, well, I was between jobs. I'd been fired at the movie channel, and I was not yet hired at TNT. And so I was going out on acting auditions. And so one of those auditions was Casino. And so, which part do you want me to tell? There's too many parts to tell.
The genre film appreciation of the finest director of the cinematic history.
Oh yeah, so I go in for the audition, and I'm kind of terrified because it's an audition for Martin Scorsese. And he walks in and says, and the first thing he says is, "Do you think the women in prison genre is a genre of its own, or is it a subgenre of the prison movie?" And I said, "Well, Mr. Scorsese, I've never thought about it like that, but I think it's probably a genre of its own." And he says, "I agree with you 100%. What's the best women in prison movie?" And I said, "Chained Heat?" "Yes, I agree with you." So we found something to talk about that kind of loosened me up, and I think I did better on the audition than I otherwise would have done. But he actually, I'll tell this part that I did not say today. When Martin Scorsese is making a movie, a lot of times he has nothing to do, because he's been working with these people for years, and so his director of photography and his lighting guys and his guys that do the setups, they don't really need him. They're doing what they're supposed to do, and every once in a while he's saying, how long till we're ready? And sometimes they just ignore him. So he's got all this time on his hands waiting for the shot to be set up, and so he's available. And so I just talked to him during those times when he was when he had nothing to do, and we were talking about, and he told me this interesting story, which is kind of heartbreaking. I said, the first movie that he ever directed, he got fired from, which was The Honeymoon Killers. And I said, so Mr. Scorsese, what did you think of the final Honeymoon Killers? And he said, oh, I didn't watch that. I could never watch that. And I said, really? And he says, oh yeah, that was the most painful thing in my life. And I said, well, what happened? I mean, why would somebody fire you after 1 week on a show? And he says, oh, they should have fired me. And he says, I was shooting films then just like I shoot them today, which is I was doing these long tracking shots that have no coverage. He says, I'm a first-time director, and they have no coverage if the shot is messed up, And so at the end of the first week, they say, you're not covering any of the things, anything that you're shooting. And he says, no, I'm not. I just have the one shot. And so they fired me. And he says, I didn't work for 3 years, so it's like a very painful, thing. And then I got Boxcar Bertha with Roger Corman. He says, I was terrified every day. We were shooting in Arkansas. And I was terrified every day that Roger Corman would show up and fire me. And so I had these storyboards showing every shot, And so the one day Roger Corman did come to the set. I showed him the storyboards. He looked at them for about 2 minutes and left. And I realized, okay, I'm not going to be fired from this. That was fine. I could breathe. And so I thought it was very, very confessional on the part of Martin Scorsese to say, it's like, I doubt many people ask him about Honeymoon Killers. So anyway, he was a great guy. He was very generous director. Robert De Niro was a very generous actor. I was in this land of giants. I was a pygmy in the land of giants, and they were all very generous and helpful.
You're so memorable in that film. You're so good in it. Thank you, Joe Bob.
Actually, actually, I'm the crux of the whole film. If he doesn't fire me, there is no movie.
Anyone in the audience have any questions? Oh, right up front, yeah.
First of all, thank you for coming to Calgary. We'd love to have you again.
Oh, actually, let me get in touch with this. I'm starting a new show next week where I'm working with the American Genre Film Archive. The American Genre Film Archive is an organization in Austin, Texas that rescues old exploitation films and restores them and makes sure they're preserved. And they have a catalog of 6,000 titles that are available for theatrical screenings only. And I'm going to introduce all 6,000 of them. We're putting together these double features, and the first 5 theaters on the tour are next week. And this is a perfect theater to bring one of the active double features to. Actually, the very first movie at the very first show is a Canadian movie. It's a Canadian tax shelter movie that probably Canada Telefilm is so ashamed of that it's probably listed on no website. But that is The Brain. How many have seen The Brain? Okay, see, even in Canada, they don't know The Brain.
What's the second one, though?
The second one is Brain Damage. So it's Toronto versus New York.
So my second question is maybe a little bit more of a convoluted question than a Joe Bob question, but you've been writing amazing true crime for years, and I was just wondering, what did you think of the weird Andy Montgomery series that they did with Jessica Biel? And also, what do you think of the whole true crime in general?
Okay, he's talking about a streaming show that was based on my book from centuries ago called Evidence of Love, which is about a murder case in North Texas in the early 80s. And there are actually 2 series based on the book. The first one has already come out on Hulu, I think. Yeah, it was on Hulu. And the other one is coming up on HBO Max. The first one was starred Jessica Biel, and the second one stars Elizabeth Olsen. And it's the same story. I don't know why there would be, you write a book and 40 years later, 2 streaming services want to do it at the same time. I don't know what's in the, I don't know what's going on with that. But I have not watched the first one yet. I assumed that the Elizabeth Olsen one would be better, but this one got so much attention that maybe they're not even going to put out the Elizabeth Olsen one now, because the first one got so much attention that I think everybody watched it, and I'm not going to watch that. I already saw that story. I don't know yet. I can't say. It was already a TV movie in 1989, 1990, somewhere along there. Barbara Hershey won the Best Acting Emmy for her portrayal of Candy Montgomery. So there have been 3 Candy Montgomerys. Maybe this is going to be like a thing you can revive every 5 years. I want to play the axe killer.
How do you feel about the true crime boom overall? Was the follow-up question.
The true crime boom in terms of like TV shows like Forensic Files and everything, well, I think it's peaked. Even though I'm a big fan of them. I watch them, but have you noticed that various networks are like repeating the same crime? Sometimes the same crime will be on like 5 or 6 different networks and decide 5 or 6 different treatments. And you know what? The cops and the district attorneys are becoming a little bit too glib about their performances. And so it's like they know how to. There's now things that every cop says and every victim says. They're like, we had no leads, but I put a picture on my desk, and every day I remember I was working for Sam. I mean, how many of them say that? You're not supposed to bury your children. They're supposed to bury you. And there's this whole series of things that they said. It's like I was a crime reporter, and I always wondered, the jury would always send these notes out, "We are deadlocked." They always use the same word, deadlocked. Where did they get the word deadlocked? You only use it, the only people that ever use it are a jury in a criminal trial. It's like, well, why didn't the note ever come out? We haven't reached a decision yet. Why is it always "we are deadlocked"? It's because they watch these shows. The word deadlocked is, what do you want to write on the note that we sent to the judge? Deadlocked.
There was a question right there, yeah.
Joe Bob, I was just curious, being from Texarkana, do you remember the first time you saw The Town That Dreaded Sundown?
Oh, The Town That Dreaded Sundown. I think I saw it in the theater, when it first came out. It was a regional release. It was Charles Pierce directed it. It was the same guy who directed The Legend of Boggy Creek, and I saw that in the theater. And The Legend of Boggy Creek 2, by the way, was directed by the director of Monster Vision at the time, and he never lived it down.
I love Boggy Creek. Any questions? Yeah, way in the backlit center.
When you were on Casino, did you meet L.Q. Jones?
Did you meet L.Q. Jones?
You know what? I briefly met L.Q. Jones. The interesting thing about L.Q. Jones, who was my uncle in the movie, because I asked Martin Scorsese am I doing a corrupt thing with my uncle L.Q. Jones, or am I just stupid? And Scorsese said, we don't know. And so it's like, so they didn't want you to know what the deal was between me and L.Q. Jones. But the interesting thing about L.Q. Jones is De Niro and Pesci and Scorsese had never met L.Q. Jones, and they were in awe of him. And they were waiting for him to arrive on the set. They could not wait for the day that L.Q. Jones, they're big fans of Westerns. And, he'd been in the Wild Bunch and a lot of great Westerns. And in fact, I think Scorsese is shooting his first Western now. They were like, when's LQ going to be here? They all wanted to meet him. That's that's sort of a lot of these legendary character actors are more revered, inside the fraternity of actors than the movie stars are.
Any other questions up there? Yeah, on the aisle there, and then I'll get you in the third row.
So you've done lots of classic horror, Night of the Living Dead and Little Shop of Horrors. But what are some other classic horror films you'd like to host?
What are some classics that you haven't hosted?
Well, I want to host them all. I'm trying to think. Is there one that I just have to host before I die? No, probably not. There's not one that. We haven't done Dawn of the Dead yet. We should probably do Dawn of the Dead before we quit. I would really like to host some of those torture porn movies from the early 1930s. For years they had censored those. Made them. Well, they made them. When they first showed in the theater, they were shocking and horrific. After Joseph Breen took over the code office in 1936, they changed the endings and they took stuff out of them when they were in re-release. And so when they were on TV in the 50s, people saw, you see the black cat or something, and you don't really think much of it. It has a comforting ending and everything. But then when the DVDs came out, they put back the original pre-code endings on them, and I don't think anybody has ever really hosted those properly.
They're nasty. They're torture porn.
Oh yeah, it's torture porn. It's and so I would like to show some of those. I would like to show some of the Val Lewton movies from the 1940s. I would like to show a lot of stuff from the 1950s, but you run up against this thing about the prejudice against black and white. The prejudice against stuff just because it's old, I would think, we did a show this year that was very risky. We did a silent movie followed by a subtitled movie, and that was the show where we celebrated. The only reason we got away with it is it was the 100th anniversary of Nosferatu, and so we were able to do that. We showed the 1922 Nosferatu, and we showed the 1979 Werner Herzog Nosferatu, which was an homage to the original Nosferatu, and they're like, that's a lot of fucking Nosferatu in one night. And so we were, concerned that people weren't going to be able to put up with all that. And for the most part, people did. We had some people who said, I can't do this. I can't, I just can't get through the second movie after watching Orlok in the first movie, So I think there are a few other, most silent films I really wouldn't put on the show, because they're just not fun to watch. That one was an exception, and partly that was because of that orchestral score that was on it. And there are a few other silent films like that. There are some, I would say the early 30s, the 40s, and the 70s, because the 70s I mean, we just had Butcher Baker, Nightmare Maker, and The Baby. How many of you saw that double? Okay. You can't watch those movies without going, what the fuck? What the fuck was happening in the 70s? You know, and the 70s is kind of the what the fuck decade. You could make any kind of movie, and it would find distribution somewhere, you know. And you could do things that you would never think you could do in a motion picture. And that's because the studios were falling apart. The studios were dying. They didn't know what to make. They didn't understand the youth culture that was growing up. And they would just greenlight stuff, you know, sort of blindly. Hey, you're 22, you must know what you're talking about. Here's $5 million, make this movie. You know, it was that kind of world, and so you ended up with things like The Baby.
Ted Post, was that Ted Post, Clint Eastwood's?
It was Ted Post, but Ted Post was an old theater guy, and he believed that a director should be passive and that you should realize the vision of the writer. He was very writer-oriented, so it was really this guy, Abe Polsky, who was the pervert. And he just like created this story, and Ted Post felt like, okay, I've got to be true to the story. And so he directed it, you know, he went hardcore for, you know, and he had all these New York method actors, and he just said, you know, we got to really believe in this story. As weird as it is, we got to really believe in it, and I think that's what makes the movie so strong. Is Ted Post didn't back away from it at all.
Did I get that question that was in the third row here?
Oh,
yeah, you? Yeah.
Well, mine's a little bit of a hypothetical. So it's a desert island, and you can only have one horror subgenre. Would mall horror be on the list? And if not,
mall horror
what?
On a desert island? No.
Desert island subgenre.
No. I mean, you know, lesbian vampire is way ahead of that.
Some good ones. Jean Rollin, Desperate Cook, The Hunger. Any other questions? Yeah, over there.
If given the challenge, in your opinion, who do you think could shoot a better one-day wonder? Jim Wynorski or Fred Olin?
Boy, that is a good question. We should have that contest. I know both of those guys. We could actually do that. I kind of think it would be Jim, because Jim can do. You know how much action there was in that movie? It's like, I mean, he had no money and no time, and that's a lot of action. I mean, admittedly, a lot of it is, okay, all three of you get guns and run around this corner. You know, but you know, that after about the midpoint, after the point where they're sitting morosely in that room wherever they are, and one of them starts to cry and they yell at him, you know, after that point, that movie just moves to the very end, you know. So I would say Jim would be the winner over Fred. Fred would try to make it too nice.
Jim did Witches of Brestwick in 3 days. You can see it in Papadopoulos, the documentary. Worth tracking down. You can rent it on Vimeo. Worth checking. Any other questions? Do I see someone else? Oh yeah, we've ignored this side. We got this gentleman on the aisle there. Or sorry to gender you, but to this person on the aisle.
Hey Joe Bob, thanks for coming. Quick question. Silo, 120 Days of Sodom, good or bad?
Solo, 120 Days of Sodom? Oh, very good, bad. So, did you know they have Caligula in the basement here? I just heard this. A 35mm print of Caligula is in the basement of this theater. I say, bring it up.
This is a couple reels, so we can shadow play that.
Oh no, you're going to performance art that.
Do we have any other questions? I don't see any, but I'm going to wrap it up with, you've probably made acquaintances with many famous screen queens and kings of the genre. Can you talk about how you first made connections with these people and what the gatherings were like in the 80s while you were celebrating this?
I was just the guy writing about these people, and no one else was writing about them, you know. And so I was the guy writing about them or hosting these movies on TV, and like nobody else was talking. I mean, eventually Roger Corman was a rebel. Eventually got an Academy Award, you know. But at the time I was writing about him. You know, nobody else was reviewing Roger Corman films, and nobody else was, you know, talking about the scream queens of the '80s and the, you know, the various people, the Jim Wynorskis and the Fred Olen Rays and all these people. So this was kind of a nerd subculture. You know, I was writing about it. John Waters was writing about it sometimes, and. There was a fanzine in New York called Sleazoid Express that was writing about it in a very weird way. But there was really nobody paying attention to what we were doing. And so yeah, it was easy to meet all the people that were, you know, working in these movies because, you know, it's like there were no like fan conventions for these people. They didn't, you know, no one was asking for their autographs. It was just like a world where people were making cheap movies and having fun. So.
And is there any particular film that has seen a renaissance since the 80s or 70s that you've been absolutely awestruck by, that you thought in no way would this ever come back?
Well, Halloween fucking 3. I mean, there have been actually several. Even though we were going to do Night of the Demons here, it's kind of a miracle that Night of the Demons survived the 80s. You know, it came back. There have been quite a few. Now, I'll tell you one that really deserved to come back is Night Beast, because that movie had been butchered when it first came out. I didn't like it when it first came out in the theater. And usually I don't watch the director's cut that comes out 20 years later. But in this case, these guys had worked on it for years to get all the old footage and to put it back in the right position and to restore Clive Barker's original vision. And it was like amazing. It was a different film. I had no idea that
Nightbreed.
Nightbreed, I'm sorry. Nightbreed.
Night Beast is also awesome.
Night Beast is
different way though.
It's like Nightbreed. I'm talking about Clive Barker. I'm not talking about
Nightbreed was shot here, Joe Bob. It was shot in Alberta.
Well, yeah, some of the exteriors were shot here. It was shot at Pinewood Studios in London. Yeah, but they came here just to shoot the mountains, just to shoot those driving sequences where they're approaching the Midian.
Yes.
They sent a second unit here, but in the underground part, you know, the bulk of the movie, that's Pinewood, some famous stage at Pinewood. I think it's actually 3 of the giant stages at Pinewood. But the movie is really outstanding, but only in that restored version. It's not, the original version that was released by 20th Century Fox in 1989 was the PR guy at 20th Century Fox actually said to Clive Barker, "We're afraid that these monsters are going to be sympathetic." And Barker said, "Yes, that's the whole point. We root for the monsters. That's the whole point of this movie." And so obviously the studio didn't understand the movie at all. They tried to change it and cut it and do weird things to it, and it caused it to disappear. This really sad thing is Clive Barker never directed another movie. And so I always think, that horrible experience probably had a big effect on that. I don't know if he would admit that, but he was doing pretty good. and suddenly he runs up against the realities of Hollywood. It's one of those things where I've seen this happen a lot with Brits who go to Hollywood, and they don't realize for the first 6 months that they're there that everyone's lying to them. and then it all hits them at once. and so it was one of those things where he was kind of naive about how Hollywood works.
Do we have any final
On
questions?
the side, right here.
Yeah. Glad to ask. Please ask away.
Just go with your questions.
Yeah, the person who said right here, what do you got to say?
Joe Bob, are there any new, young, independent filmmakers that we should be watching?
New young independent filmmakers that we should be watching. Yes, there's a lot of them. I won't get all their names right because I watch their films and I forget exactly who it was. But the guy who did Tennessee Gothic, as one person has seen it. See, the problem with the young talented filmmakers is marketing and distribution. It's like we live in a period where the technology got really cheap, and so a lot of people can make really fine films with the technology that exists. What they can't do is break through the system of the 5 or 6 companies that control access to what gets promoted and streamed. And so you end up on a menu. You're on somebody's menu. You're probably on the Amazon Prime menu for about a month. And then
shout out Tubi.
Okay, yeah. And then if you're not discovered in that month, then you for the rest of your life, you're like, have you seen my movie? I have a movie, and it's a shame because there's no level playing field. It's it's not a news story. I mean, there's always been 6 or 7 companies that control what gets seen, and that's the only difference is it used to be the companies in Southern California, now it's the companies in Northern California. All the Netflix guys, all the Silicon Valley guys went down to Hollywood and took it over. But it's still 5 or 6 companies that control what gets seen. And actually, because Shudder can't afford the huge movies, Shudder is a good place to find the young filmmakers. Those Shudder originals, some of them are outstanding. And so if you're not watching them, you should check out some of those because those kind of are where the young filmmakers can. And I don't know if any of you saw my interview with Roger Corman, but I asked him at the end of the night, is there any way to do what you did in the 50s today? And he said there's a little slight window, and that window is horror. And he says you can sort of break in, if you make the right horror film. And so there are opportunities. I mean, a lot of the guys that make the blockbuster horror films, because we now have blockbuster horror films. I blame Shake of Water for that. But we have, David Gordon Green was an indie guy. Ty West was an indie guy. And now they get big budgets to make horror films. There was no such thing in an earlier era as a big budget to make a horror film. I mean, maybe the last one before Shape of Water may have been, or the last one before, let's say, Saw 3 or something was probably Exorcist 3, And so we're in this new era where if you have the right horror franchise, then you get millions of dollars, And if you have a new horror franchise, you get $3. But if you can make that $3 work for you, there still is a small window where you can break into the business. Of course, a lot of those guys, they break into the business on horror, and then they say, I don't want to make horror anymore. I want to make something else, And so, and then 10 years later, after everyone hates all their films, they say, I'm going to make horror films again.
Well, if anybody else has any questions, Joe Bob's going to be signing in the back. And if you could give us some room as we clear, that would be amazing. And if you could also give a huge round of applause for Joe Bob.
This is Trish getting a tarot reading.
Yes.
So this is called the Four Elements reading. It's 6 cards. There's the 4 elements, air, fire, water, earth, and then the 2 center cards are spirit and universe. And what it is it's a general reading of what's going on with you right now.
Oh my. Okay.
So I'm going to let you shuffle those till you feel that they're ready.
Okay.
That's how you shuffle?
Well, tarot cards, yes, because I don't want to hurt them.
They're also ginormous.
Yeah, like I can.
I say this having tried to shuffle them, and they're just a nightmare to shuffle.
Yeah, that's the thing, and you can't. Yeah. Plus, I want to be gentle with them because they're awesome.
You don't want to piss off the cards.
No, I want them to be happy.
You're afraid they're going to give you a knockout punch?
Yeah, I think they're happy.
All right, sweet.
Inevitably, every time I do a reading, I pull the Tower.
Oh God. I don't know much, but I know.
All right. So air, here in the east, represents mind. It is your thought process. It's what's going on here intellectually. Okay? And what we've got is, very nice. We've got a lot of happy memories. We've got a lot of looking back at how we got to where we are. Okay? So the 10 of Pentacles is very much about reflection and reflecting on what is going on now that you have achieved through all the things you did in the past. So right now is a great time for your mental energy to be focused on how did I get from A to B? Because I'm in a really good place right now. So let's just take a quick few notes here and be like, yeah, this is where I want to be. So very perky card. See, I got goosebumps. It's very perky, right? Fire in the south is your passion. It's your ambition and desire and drive. It's those things we're born with, we don't learn. It's like instinct.
Yes.
The Ace of Wands is perhaps the most powerful card for passion because right now you are inspired and inspiration drives passion. I would suspect you are already thinking of other projects and things you want to start, you want to do, you want to begin, you want to make happen. It's already percolating in your brain and you are feeling empowered by it and the power is coming through in this card. The Ace of Wands is the very beginning of passion and it is like strong. It's the ace, right? So it is the card, right? So, Jesus. So yeah, definitely I would look forward to anything you created out of this energy because this is some amazing energy. Water in the west is your emotions, okay? So it is the ebb and flow. It could be a still pond, it could be a raging ocean, but emotion is like water. It flows and sometimes it stagnates, right? So let's see what's going on with you. Oh, happy memories. Happy. And this parallels this card very well because what went before is informing what is happening right now, but in a very positive way. These are snapshots of a happy childhood, like in a literal sense. But also what it is telling you is that your past has inspired you today. Who you were has informed who you are right now in a very positive way. So whatever's going on with you right now, it's sparking all these memories that are like, yeah, these are my feel-goods. These are my happies. I want to share this, right? And I'm definitely getting a sense of sharing here too. Like you are wanting to do things that are like, no, I want to reach out to people. I want to reach out and spread this energy around. So Earth in the north is your physical self and the physical, tangible world around you. So it's your day-to-day, it's your work, it's your routine, it's your body, it's all of those things. The Queen of Wands, again, the Queen of Passion, okay? She is, she's flexible, she is very, she's give and take, she understands what she wants to say, but she's also listening at the same time. She is a very, very flexible person, so right now, in your tangible day-to-day life, you are having flexibility. You're like, I have options open to me. Like, oh my God, like this, everything is coming together. Everything is syncing up. It's synchronicity, right? And the little black cat here is for wisdom. All right, so the black cat is inspiration and also remember what you need to do to get this done, even when you're excited.
Yes.
Right? So you've got some stability there, which is actually very, very good to have in your environment when you've got all this energy around you, okay? Spirit is you inside yourself, looking at yourself in a mirror. Okay, it is you and it's your conversation with you. The Ace of Pentacles. You worry a lot about how things are going to get done? How do I afford it? How does it come to be? How do I manifest it, right? I mean, the ideas aren't the problem. Making it real is a challenge for you. And so this card comes right up and goes, yeah, but what about this? Yeah, but what about this? And you're like, I am trying to have a moment here. Could you just let me have this? It's like, but practicality is not something you ignore. And that's a good trait, right? So yes, this rears its ugly head, but I mean, it's only there to help, right? And you're honest. Yeah, and you're honest with yourself, because this is a you card. This is a card inside you. Now, universe is the universe looking at you from the outside. It's how you are perceived externally by others. And what they see is, wow, okay, I don't know what stress vibes you've been giving to other people, but they're like, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Until you're like, leave me alone, I'm fine, right? But for whatever reason, they assume that there must be something going on with you, because maybe you've been vulnerable, or maybe you have been closed off because you are focused somewhere else. But to them, it's like, oh, she's having a rough time. And you're like, well no, I'm busy. I'm thinking, I'm sorry I'm not entertaining you right now, but I mean, I'm fine. So just be aware that other people are seeing your energy as tortured. And it's like, oh, she must be so stressed. Oh God, right?
I can see that.
Yeah, and if people come...
Very accurate.
Yeah, and if people come to you with that, let them off the hook. Now, I'm going to give you a tools card. And this is your best advice based on this reading. Woo. Okay, that was interesting. I'm going to go with this one. The King of Swords is the king of communication, all right? The King of Swords is fair, but just as well, right? So that means that he can be inflexible, but he is honest, all right? So in this case, it's like, speak your truth, stand in your truth. If it makes other people uncomfortable, that's too bad, but honesty is better, right? So be honest with your dealings, and things will sort themselves out, even if it means an uncomfortable patch in the short term.
Mm-hmm. Well, like that one, communicate.
Yeah.
Communicate with the people outside so that they know.
Yes.
But yeah, this is scarily accurate.
Oh, well, thank you.
Like, scarily thinking about what's been going on and how things have been culminating.
I've been reading for about 35 years, so it is very, very nice to hear that, yes, there is some accuracy here.
Oh, yeah, because, I mean, just a new stage of my life right now. So a new stage, but also an old stage is sort of what's happening.
Because
so
we've got memory, we've got past coming into present, we've got information from previous situations informing your current situation.
The Goosebumps sold me, because that told me he was totally tuned in to your vibes.
I'm very excited about all of this.
Oh, well, good.
But yeah, now I just have to be the practical, because there is stuff that's got to get done.
Yep, just don't let it obscure your vision.
Okay.
Like, it's there, I see you. No, you're not first. You're not the only thing. You're just a thing. Right.
And your neurotic energy stresses me and Sam out.
I know, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. There's a lot happening.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool.
Because I mean, that's the whole thing. Like, I am busy. You're right, I am busy.
But your energy it's a very positive, almost fairy-like energy, like hip, 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 like, and I'm just like, and I'm just like zing, like every time I tune into it, I feel invigorated, I feel effervescent, I feel sunshine meadows, like, oh my God, you guys, I want to share. And, and like, some people don't get that, and some people do, but you're really just jazzing me up right now.
And we know this is almost the completely opposite of a horror con reading that our listeners were probably expecting, but I dig it. I'm glad to see that positive energy is in your life. Makes me feel better too.
I know, and there's relief knowing about this, because it was sort of, again, I was feeling a lot of this stuff, but I'm like, am I on the right area? Is the right thing happening?
Death is coming. I'm just kidding. Sorry. That was your obligatory horror moment.
It is coming for everyone.
Indeed. It's just slower for some.
Exactly. I don't know what's going to happen. I just want it to be memorable.
Right? For real.
And my funeral's going to be awesome.
Sweet.
People are going to be drunk, unless, of course, you're in recovery. Then you don't have to be drunk. You just have to be there.
But it's permissible.
Oh, it's permissible. If you aren't hammered at my funeral, you have to have a reason.
Yeah.
The first hymn is Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead.
Yay!
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that was a 2 Gargs rating. And that will do it for HorrorCon this year for 2022. We had a lot of fun. We got a lot of panels. It was great. We're hoping to have even a bigger presence next year where we can actually get some interviews. It was a little bit of a weird year this year where we kept running to the panels, and by the time we had some free time, we'd always get stopped and people talking to us and back to a panel. And then we never got to actually get to the tables to talk to the guests as when we wanted to because we were always in the panel room. So we'll try to get all 3 of us next year where we can spread out and somebody's recording the panels, somebody's doing interviews at the tables. And boy, we'll have a lot of content for you next year if we can make that work. If you like this episode, if you like the HorrorCon episodes, if you like what we do for the last 8 years, please give us a like and subscribe, and please tell your friends about the show. Join us on our social media at Invasion Remake on Twitter, Invasion of the Remake on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. And of course, you can email us at invasionoftheremake@gmail.com, where you can send us your suggestions, your corrections, and your comments. And of course, your fan challenges. We will be getting back to those next year. So in the next season, that'll be our 9th season starting next year in January. That's crazy. And of course, visit our website, invasionoftheremake.wixsite.com/podcast. And over there, you can find a list of our archives and where to find the show. And there's also a big store button. You can support the show by buying some merch from RT Public Store. Lots of cool designs. Some new ones went up for 31 Days of Horror. And we got some new holiday-themed shirts as well. Check out some of the old designs because we're going to be retiring some of those soon. So watch our social media for the designs we're going to be retiring, and these will be your last chance to get some of those designs. So don't delay. This will be your last chance to get some of our older designs, and we'll be freshening up the store with even more new designs throughout 2023. All right. Well, thanks for listening to all these HorrorCon episodes and being understanding about the move. It was thrust upon me very suddenly, and the gang will be back when we return. It'll be a few weeks off, so don't worry. We will be back in your feeds regularly in 2023 and hopefully before the end of 2022. So look out for that. We'll have some stuff in your feed very, very soon, but we'll probably be off for a couple of weeks. For our U.S. friends, happy Thanksgiving, and we'll catch you down the road very, very soon. Until then, I've been Jason, and for Trish and Sam, we are out of here.
Did you guys hear the one about the guy who's broke and he's stuck in an unhappy marriage? And he decides to solve both problems by taking out a large insurance policy on his wife with himself as the beneficiary and arranging to have her killed. So a friend of a friend puts him in touch with an underworld figure who goes by the name of Artie. And Artie explains to the guy that his going price for snuffing out a spouse is $5,000. Well, the guy says he's willing to pay that amount, but he won't have any cash on hand until he can collect his wife's insurance money. So Artie insists on being paid something up front. So the man opens up his wallet and he shows the hitman a $1 bill. And Artie sighs and he rolls his eyes and he agrees to accept the dollar as a down payment on the hit. So a few days later, Artie follows the man's wife to the local Safeway grocery store. And there he surprises her in the produce department and he proceeds to strangle her with his gloved hands. And as the poor woman draws her last breath and slumps to the floor, the manager of the produce department stumbles onto the scene, and Artie has no choice but to strangle the produce manager as well. But unknown to Artie, the entire thing is captured by hidden cameras and observed by the store's security guard, who immediately calls the police. Artie is caught and he's arrested before he can leave the store. And after intense questioning at the police station, Artie reveals the whole plan, including his financial arrangements with the husband, which is why the next day in the newspaper, the headline says, Artie chokes 2 for $1 at Safeway.